Hello everybody. Today I wanted to answer a little bit of an older question from our supporter Opal on the Discord, and they were asking how to go about art direction exploration or like style exploration for comic projects. So I've done a few videos on this where I've shown how I've explored new styles for certain illustrations and comics. For example, our comic, The Books of Avo, which was originally a novel, and I did illustrations for that original novel, and I really wanted the illustrations to, while still maintaining my style, have influence from 1920s illustrators of the time, because the Books of Avo is set in like a 1920s inspired world. So I did a lot of style exploration to try and meet that in the middle. Honestly, whenever I start any comic, I always do a little bit of style exploration, even if I know for sure, like, this is very much going to be my style. Like, I mean, you know, anything you make is going to have your style to it. But I always like to sit down when I'm starting a new comic project and really think about all the visuals I want to include to make the vibes work. There's a lot to consider when you're at this stage, but it's also a really fun stage. There's so much possibility. I find it really, really fun to explore different styles before I like cement into one. So I'll go over what I've done in the past when I am exploring the style and art direction of a new comic project. So I always start with creating mood boards. This is one of the really fun parts about creating a new comic style. You basically go around wherever, you can look through, honestly, any reference you want. You can look at books, you can look at the internet, you can go through Pinterest, you can go through like all the artists you follow. You can grab movies, you can grab whatever you want, just any visuals you think are cool. You can look at like historical paintings, you can look at art movements, you can look at architecture. You're just grabbing anything that you think suits this project. And this is a great exercise because you can do it if you have an idea of where you want your style to be. If you're like, I have this image of what I want this comic to feel like in my mind, you can go and just find examples that are similar to the vibes you have in your head. And if you're in the other camp where you're like, I have no idea what I really want this to feel like, this is a great opportunity to look through a bunch of inspiration and start to choose what direction you're looking for. Now, this mood board is just for you and your team if you know you're working with other creatives. It's just a place to gather your ideas. I would definitely, like, if you're sharing things, especially like on your social medias, I would credit everything that you find on your mood board. It also just helps you if you're like going back. You're like, oh, who's the artist who created this? Like, you can go back and find more of their work and find more inspiration. But this is just like a dump of like all your ideas, all the directions you can go. Sometimes I'll make multiple mood boards where I'm like, maybe I want it to be like this style, but maybe I want it to be like this style. I'll have different sections where I'm like, this is what I want like the covers of the books to feel. This is what I want like my speech bubbles to be like. This is the character design. This is like the visual motifs. I go really in depth just because I like this step a lot. And it's really, really helpful when I'm working with Bones, who's my writer/colorist, who's the other person on this channel, where I'm able, without having to spend hours crafting a new style, I can say like, these are the colors I want. This is the kind of style idea I want. I want to use like these colors with this rendering style. What do you think? And it's a lot easier on me than recreating that stuff to just show Bones, here's my ideas. And then he'll come back to me and be like, well, here's some ideas I have. Like, I grabbed this piece by so-and-so, and I think you should use colors like this. And we discuss, and it's really easy to like get an idea of what you want really quickly. And it's so fun. I love mood boards. I love brainstorming new styles. And like I said, you can grab them from anywhere. It doesn't have to be other artists. It can be from like any medium. It's just whatever visuals you want to pull into your project. If you're not sure where to start, I would look at artists you admire. I would look at other comics to see what other people have done, because maybe you can build off of it, or you can do something completely new that no one has done before. You can grab color inspiration, art style inspiration. You can grab like research. When I was doing all the 1920 stuff, I grabbed a lot of reference material of like, what did clothing in the 1920s look like? What did architecture, the cars, the technology, what what visual motifs were popular, what were people using wallpaper, what was the pattern on the wallpaper. So you can deep dive into like a setting or wherever your research and your comic takes you. You can look at visual motifs, you can look at typography ideas, whether that's for like the covers of your comic, the logo of your comic, speech bubbles, captions. So go have fun, make your mood boards. And I think this is part of the like mood board inspiration capturing part of finding your style. But if you have styles you're looking at, like let's say you find an artist you really like and you're looking at their style and you're not sure why it appeals to you, I would say a great starting point is to look at that artist, look at the project, if it's a comic book, if it's just an artist's style that you really like, sit down and try to figure out why you like it. Do you like the line work? Do you like the color choices? Do you like how minimal things are? Do you like how detailed things are? Really sit down and analyze this work that inspires you and figure out what appeals to you that you can put into your own work. Maybe not copying it exactly, but you're like, this artist uses like really simplified shapes, really minimal designs. I'm not going to steal their style, but I'm going to bring that minimalist vision into my own work. And that can really, really help when you have stuff that inspires you, where you can figure out what you like about it without stealing their style like whole cloth. We're always going to have people who influence us, work that influences us, that will appear in our work. Especially if you've been drawing for like a long time. I know as a kid, I did a lot of copying of like manga artists I liked, of other digital webcomic artists that I liked, and that has kind of fed into my style, but it's grown like as I've gotten older. And I wish when I was younger, I would have been able to have that insight to like look at these creators I admire and really think about what appeals to me, because it took a long time to really distill things that I liked from their work by doing it like organically as I grew as an artist. So taking the time to like figure out what you like will really, really help you define a style that appeals to you and is still like your own. Anyways, ramble over. Now, once you have your mood board, you figured out the direction of everything, you have your roadmap, that is when I would say it's time to start drawing. Now, I would start with some small style experiments. So I've done this where I will take maybe a character design I've made and I will try painting it in different styles. I'll try lining it in different styles, but I did this with 9-Point when we were first doing the visual development for it. It was the first comic where I wanted like kind of a lineless, rendered out painterly style, whereas in the past I've always done like heavy line art, heavy black and white. So I sat down, I took some of the character designs we had, and I tried it out in some different styles and some different coloring techniques until I had something that I liked. And it wasn't perfect, it wasn't how the comic ended up, but it was a good starting direction, and it was good to be able to show Bones, hey, this is what I'm thinking it will look like, and we discussed changes and things we wanted made. And I did a few more of those really small illustrations to just figure it out. And once you're happy with those experiments, you can also do some test pages. I think test pages are important because there's a lot that goes into like the style of a comic that's more than just like your art style. With general style, there's lots of ways to experiment, change things. You can try different line art, you could do no line art, you can do different coloring techniques, different rendering styles, cel shading versus painterly. You can have different color choices you can play with, different like motifs, inspiration from like art movements, textures, repeating shapes. You can play around with different amounts of detail, different amounts of like simplification and stylization, taking it farther from realism, making it more realistic. That kind of feeds into like general art style kind of stuff. But when it comes to comics, there are specific elements that can also have like their own style. So it can be speech bubbles. It can be like the font you use. It can be the shapes and colors you're using on your speech bubbles. It can be your gutters or panel outlines, gutters being the spaces between panels. You can use different lines. You can go lineless. You can color your gutters. You can leave them white. You can have no gutters where the panels all like touch each other. You can stylize, I guess, like visual signifiers. So like when you have a flashback, what do your flashbacks look like? Some people will use like a black fill to the gutters. Some people will color everything in like sepia tone. Things like that you can define however you want, whatever fits your story and the vibe. But whatever you choose, you kind of have to be consistent with it. All your flashbacks should look like XYZ. You can stylize what maybe breaks your panels. That's something Bones and I have used a lot in our comics, Pretty Mouth and the Magpie, where we're dealing with like elder god characters, where a lot of the time when the monsters show up, the panels break. That was like a signifier of like, here's a big powerful monster that breaks reality. But you can choose things like that. You can choose how like magic shows up, how different elements of your story affect like how panels are laid out or stylized. You can have different caption styles. For example, like some stories will have really like pretty gilded frames to like whenever there's narration or captions happening versus like speech bubbles, which are more regular. You can stylize your sound effects different ways where, maybe there's specific colors, maybe different characters have different styles of sound effect where you use different fonts or different effects. I think those are the comic specific things to really think about. And I guess further than that, you can think about like the dimensions of your comic page. Some of that does come to like how you're publishing it. So like if you're printing it, you want it at like a standard printing size. If you're posting it on a website like Webtoon or Tapas, they have specific dimensions that you need. But I think you can also play around with those dimensions to give your comic a different feel. So when you're doing your test pages, these are all things to consider and play around with. These don't have to be like actual pages from your comic, though that does help because then you have like real context you're working with of your story. But these can just be like, I want to test out how different speech bubbles will work with my characters in a flashback with the specific effect happening. Test pages are a great way to try that out before putting it down to like the actual page. And when you get super famous, you can share them and people will be like, whoa, look at what it could have been. So that's extra bonus. And in the end, it really just takes picking something sometimes. Sometimes you're like, I don't really know where I want to go with this. Sometimes you just gotta pick something. It can help to get feedback, show it to other people. We actually have a Discord where other comic artists and writers share their work all the time for feedback. We have like a little creative discussion section. So if you click the link in the description, you can go to the Discord. You can get feedback on your style choices for your specific comic project. That is always really, really helpful when you are in the kind of planning development stages to get lots of eyes on it, different opinions, see if you're getting across what you want to get across. And other than that, you just gotta pick. You just gotta go forward with something. The nice thing about working in webcomics is that styles do evolve over time. Webcomics are usually like a labor of love. They're passion projects. It's usually one or a small group of people working on it. And it's common for the style to change over time as you work on it over the years and you improve as an artist. There's a lot of acceptance around like your start of your comic doesn't have to be as good as your later pages. So posting your webcomic and just working on it and figuring out the style as you go is also acceptable. don't let this development stuff get in your way of making your comic and publishing it. That is the goal. That's where you want to be. But also, like, take time and have fun and play around with your art direction. Just don't get stuck in that stage, okay? That's my advice. Thank you all for watching. That is all I have. Please make sure to like the video. It really helps out the channel. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye!